So this month, non-governmental organization Gift of the Givers commemorates 30 years of existence. For 3 decades, the NGO has been on call for various disasters from fires and drought to humanitarian relief in war zones and natural disaster sites. We're joined by the founder, Dr. Imtiaz Sooliman, to reflect on the 3 decades of existence. Dr. Sooliman, good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for availing yourself. Perhaps just take us back to 30 years ago when this was an idea. How did it all start?
Good afternoon, Dudu. Thank you very much. It never was my idea. Gift of the Givers is not my organization. I didn't get up one morning and say, I need to form an organization, I need to get some members, I need to write a constitution, I need to write down some founding principles. It never happened like that. It's a very spiritual basis and a very spiritual origin. I met a spiritual master whom I was told about in the late 80s, based in Istanbul in Turkey. And that was in 1986 when I was told about that master. And I thought to myself, when will I ever end up in Turkey? But that was just for a visit. I went there in 91, I met him for the first time. And then in 92, on the 6th of August, coinciding with 6th of August of last week, 30 years ago, it was a Thursday night at 10 p.m. He suddenly looks me in the eye from the corner of the room, and he says in fluent Turkish, I don't speak a word of Turkish, but I understood every word he said. He said, my son, I'm not asking you. I'm instructing you to form an organization. The name in Arabic will be Waqful Waqifin. You will serve all people of all races, all religions, all colors, all classes, all cultures, of any geographical location and of any political affiliation, but you will serve them unconditionally. You will expect nothing in return, not even a thank you. This is an instruction for you for the rest of your life. And remember, whatever you do is done through you and not by you. This was very spiritual.
With every high call to service, it's not easy, right? So the road will be paved sometimes with very fiery stones, if you will. Just talk us through some of the most challenging times and whether at some point you thought, no, maybe this is not for me.
No, yes, in disaster work, it's always challenging. You know, we understand that. He said from the beginning, he said you'll have a lot of challenges. And in fact, the first project we undertook was the civil war in Bosnia. The same month, August 92, we responded with 32 containers of aid into a war zone. And in November, we went with another 8 containers of aid. And the following year, we designed the world's first and only containerized mobile hospital, a product of South African technology, built in Africa, taken into Europe. I was obstructed for 20 weeks for trying to get the hospital into Bosnia. There was obstruction from every quarter. And, you know, some people said, you know what, you've tried, it's okay, you've done the effort, leave it be, take it somewhere else. And I said, no, people are in difficulty, they are dying, they need health services. I can't stop. It's not in my nature to give up things. In my vocabulary, there's no such word as can't. And that carries throughout the entire organization. We don't understand the word can't. And if you on the other side, and you think if you and your family on the other side, you know, you would expect people to respond to you. So we can't turn back. So Bosnia was a huge challenge. The war in Syria was a challenge. The hunger in Somalia and the friction and the fighting taking place while you're trying to deliver aid in Somalia was a challenge. In Haiti, they were shooting in the streets and looting, and there was the stench of death everywhere. So many 250,000 people had passed on. In Pakistan, we couldn't get into the mountains without helicopters. People had died everywhere. So it's emotionally and physically draining. But our teams are well trained in advance to expect this kind of crisis and to respond to it. In South Africa, of course, the big challenge, that was the longest challenge ever. A disaster, you normally take 7-10 days to respond to, but COVID took almost 2 years. And it had a draining effect on all members of our team, you know, their families, people involved in hospitals. So it was a tough time. But because we know this process so well, everybody stood together and supported each other all the time.
Speaking of your team, so you met the alchemist and you heeded the call. To some degree, you are the alchemist to some members of your team. What is it that you think draws people to the organization and makes them stay?
It's got to do with the spiritual nature of the people that come to the organization. It draws people of various religions, of different colors, of different races, of different cultural groups, and they all come with one single-minded purpose: how to help people to help themselves, how to assist people, how can we make a difference. and they're prepared to sacrifice their own lives. They're going to war zones. They're prepared to sacrifice their families, their children, and they are driven by this passion to go and help other people. And it's that same group of people that have gone into war zones that drove the processes in the South African hospitals in COVID. It's like-minded people who want a shared spirituality, who have a love for people, and they respond in the most incredible way, totally selfless. And you just, in fact, so much so that when we were in Syria, people asked us, because remember the teams are evolving. It was not the same people all the time. New people coming all the time. And when we were in Syria, the medical guys, they were not many, because many were killed. So there were few, and they needed support. And they asked, how many years have you guys been working together? And that team was a fairly new team, and most people had never met each other before. And we said we met each other, most of us, for the first time here. They said we're lying. It's impossible. How can people work with such unity and understanding, having not worked before? It's a spirituality, the same kind of thought processes that make us work together, think together, know exactly what we're going to do next.
Is there space for other organizations to do the work that you do, and is there space for collaboration?
There is enough space. The world is full of crisis right now. There's not enough people to do the crisis, to deal with the crisis. There's work, yes, so there's enough space for everybody. There's so many diverse areas. Your program, I'm talking about energy. I mean, energy is a huge problem in this country and throughout the world because of the crisis now in Ukraine. There's hunger throughout Africa. There's drought in Somalia. There's people who need skills. There's a shortage of skills. There's medical support required. People need psychological support in the country, in the continent, and throughout the world. There's human trafficking. There's people who've lost the path, who need to be guided right. People have been taken, by drug traffickers, or drug dealers. People getting lost. People have to be assisted in terms of the difficulties they have, and people have to be guided to move away from the kind of things that cause harm to fellow beings. Also, people get involved in wars and instigate wars. They have to be taken away. So they require spiritual interaction. It requires a human interaction. It requires assistance from a physical point of view and an emotional point of view. We do collaborate with other organizations, but when I say that, when we go to a disaster area, we see what they're doing, so we don't encroach on the same area. We say, okay, you guys are doing street A, we will do street B. And they will come and say, we need this machine, can you help us? We'll say, yes, we have a spare one, you can have it. And they will come to us and say, we have this medication, we don't require it anymore, can you take it? So it's an understanding that we work with each other, but still separately.
Fair enough. Dr. Sooliman, who helps the helper? Who guides the guider, for lack of a better word? Who counsels the counselor? What fills your cup?
We have our own counseling division. Gift of the Givers has 21 different categories of projects. And each category has its own different subcategories. Counseling is one of the main parts of Gift of the Givers. We have our own counseling team, we have trauma counselors, and we have abundant psychologists in the country wanting to work with us at any time. The strange thing is that none of the healthcare workers ever ask for counseling, even though they may need it. But strangely again, when we're in difficult situations, they sort of get together, make jokes, laugh, relieve the pressure, even in a war zone. They talk to each other, and they have an affinity with each other where they talk their issues away, and they find solace in the team itself. The comfort comes from the team itself. The other important thing that I do, although, as I said, we have counselors on standby and available anytime they want it. We even make them available, but most of them don't take that, that offer. Except now, during COVID itself, for the first time, I've seen huge numbers of healthcare workers, not necessarily my team, but a huge number of healthcare workers saying they need mental health, mental support. The crisis has been too huge. It's affected people in a bad way. They need help. Is there a workshop? Is there some yoga? Is there some kind of mindfulness or some kind of meditation? People need that. So, there has been a huge request for that. And the other thing that we do, I always train them. I always speak to them. And I tell them, you guys have all heard the word social distancing, but long before social distancing, I should teach them about emotional distancing, that you don't attach yourself to a situation, a person, a child, or an adult. You can feel compassion for the conditions of the people, but don't attach yourself to anyone personally. The moment you do that, it's going to affect you, and you're not going to be able to work.
Emotional distancing. Dr. Imtiaz Sooliman is founder of Gift of the Givers. They celebrate 30 years. A big congratulations to you, and thank you very much for availing yourself.